Hey guys, in this video we want to talk about the idea, the built-in assumption that the oldest manuscripts are therefore the most reliable. That this is the main, the main working assumption by which textual critics judge the validity of a manuscript. You know, if it's the oldest, therefore it's the most reliable. What we want to conclude is that that's not necessarily the case, rationally speaking. Besides the fact, as we covered in the last video, that when you are subordinating the Bible to textual criticism, you are putting your presuppositions under, subordinating the Scriptures to science, falsely so called, because it can't be legitimate science if it's not founded on Scripture. And so you're subordinating the Scriptures to textual criticism and papyrology when you follow the new Bibles, and so the conclusion could only be probabilities. So one of the foundations of this textual criticism is that the oldest has to be the most reliable. Well, evangelical scholars as well as secular scholars, most textual critics today are secularists, and they don't believe we can ever get back to the authentic text of Scripture, the original text of the New Testament. And the only reason that evangelical scholars believe it's possible is because they have a presupposition that God preserved His words, and they believe that He preserved His words through the manuscripts, all the manuscript tradition, and that it's up to them to figure out what it is, and the problems with that we indicated in the previous video. But one of the working assumptions they have is that the oldest is the most reliable. We just want to look at Scripture and give you an example. Paul in 2 Thessalonians, he told the Thessalonians not to be soon shaken in mind or troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as from us. So he was warning the Thessalonians not to be troubled, as if there's a letter that would be from Paul. So you might have a manuscript that dates closer to the time of Paul, but it doesn't indicate that it's authentic. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily from Paul, or that's the most reliable. The other thing, we look at, another example from Scripture, is when Paul was leaving the Ephesian elders and he was charging them. He mentioned in his Acts 20 and verse 29, he said, "No, I know this, or this I know. I'm sorry. For I know this, that after my departing shall grievous wolves enter in among you, not sparing the flock. Also, of your own selves shall men arise, speaking perverse things, to draw away disciples after them among yourselves." So somebody could say, "Oh, this guy was a disciple of the apostle." Well, that doesn't mean he would then go off the rails. Paul had some people that forsook him and spoke evil against him, and they were, previously with him. Demas had forsaken him, loving this present evil world. So the oldest doesn't necessarily mean the most reliable, and so we question whether or not they even know it's the oldest, because we don't, you could have an old fragment of a counterfeit dollar bill. You could have an old fragment of a counterfeit dollar bill, and it could predate all of your evidence of the dollar bill. And all it would really indicate is that if you have a counterfeit, that the original must have been there somewhere, although we don't have a historical accounting of that dollar bill. The fact that we have a counterfeit would indicate that the authentic was there somewhere. So anyway, the idea that the oldest is the most reliable is not rationally true. It makes some sense from a historical standpoint, but when it comes to infallibilities, when it comes to probabilities, the Scripture is not subordinated to probabilities. It is infallible, and so we have to let it remain our final authority, and not papyrology, not the science of textual criticism. That's not final authority, and it can't represent final authority because it has to presume the truth of Scripture in order to function. So again, you follow the new Bibles, you are subordinating the text of Scripture to science, falsely so called. Alright, so let me know what you think in the comments below, and we'll try to finish fleshing this out, alright?